Welcome back to another video. So one of the biggest misconceptions with buy, borrow, die is you need to have a trust to do the strategy. It's almost written online as it's an absolute requirement. And honestly, it really is not. For 90% of operators, a trust just adds massive complexity. And the more complicated a structure is, it feels like it's more safe, but from my research, it is definitely not. Now, just to clarify, I'm going to be really talking about an irrevocable trust or like a domestic asset protection trust. These are the main ones that people want to use to protect their assets. The other is just a standard revocable living trust, which you can see here. These are actually very important just because all they do is make probate smooth. It's a seamless transition at death or if you are critically injured or hurt. And this is something you do want, because if you can imagine you were involved in a car crash or an accident and you could not control the portfolio and the market crashed and there could be a margin call and you were not there to organise and sort it out. So yes, you do want to have one of these, but they don't offer any asset protection whatsoever. People set these up and 80% of them go unfunded in the USA. So people actually set them up and don't even change the name to match the trust. So they instead of keeping it John Doe, they're supposed to change it to like John Doe Living Trust. And most people don't do it. So yeah, you want to have one of those. But really I want to talk about the asset protection side of it. I don't really know where it's come from, because really I have done extensive research on trust structuring and I just can't see why or where it really fits to the buy, borrow, die strategy. So an irrevocable living trust is got solid asset protection because effectively you are surrendering the assets. Because if you're the settler of a trust, you cannot be the beneficiary and you cannot be the trustee. I mean, you can have a position there like the investment manager or something because you're the one that's setting it up. But honestly, the way it works best is when you actually use it for its intended purpose. And there's all these sort of fancy ways people try to get around the core usage of this irrevocable trust. And honestly, my conclusion after months of researching it is it's really just for the children, it's for the heirs and the beneficiaries. And if you use it that way, you will get absolute asset protection. But I think what people trying to confuse it with the buy, borrow, die framework, it just doesn't make any sense. Because first of all, how do you get money from an irrevocable living trust? I mean, it's in the name, irrevocable. So you've surrendered your assets and now you want to try and get them back. So people try and come up with all these different ways. One of the main strategies is they take a loan from the trust. And it sounds straightforward, doesn't it? It sounds like it fits perfectly into the buy, borrow, die. But when you start borrowing from the trust, if this is abused, it really can be pierced quite easily, because it actually has to be a fully legitimate loan. So you have to first of all use the IRS AFR rates. So you have to use these actual rates, and they're usually based around a US Treasury rate. But more important than that, you have to sort of pledge some sort of collateral. So you can't just borrow $1 million from the trust as an unsecured loan. Because what will happen is, like, the IRS or a judge or whoever is causing scrutiny, they look at it and say, if this wasn't, you that settled the trust, would this be a legitimate loan? And if it doesn't look 100% legitimate, they will basically just say, this trust is just you in a trench coat. This is an alter ego, this is a sham, and we're just going to pierce it, and you're going to get taxed anyway. So I don't know. I mean, I've looked extensively at all these different ways that people try and get around it, and I just don't see it working. I mean, I think it's very expensive way of, complicating something that can be made so much more simpler. And then we get to offshore trusts. Okay, this is like the nuclear bunker option, like a Cook Islands trust. And honestly, this is overkill. I mean, an irrevocable trust is overkill as it is if you're trying to use it for yourself. I just do not see how this works. What some people try and strategize is, well, if the spouse is a beneficiary and the spouse draws from the trust and that money goes to like a joint account or the spouse's account ideally, and they spend the money, you benefit indirectly. That's one strategy that people use. But again, the truth is, if you are getting a lawsuit filed against you, a judge just uses complete common sense. And we can see this from historic rates, cases, like the Anderson case. And the Anderson case was very interesting because what he had done is he put a duress clause in it. So if you are getting a lawsuit against you, the trust automatically removes the settlor or their position from the trust, and they were basically revoked of all authority as being a beneficiary in any sort of way. And the judge basically said, well, you purposely made that impossible, so therefore it was self-created. And the point stands, like a judge can just use 100% common sense. So someone says, I have no assets in my own name, everything's in a trust, but yet they live a lavish lifestyle. A judge can just simply say, well, this trust is just a sham. So it causes more problems than it's actually worth. And they're very expensive to set up. You know, you could be costing like 150 grand to set one of these up. And asset protection agents obviously monetize confusion and complexity, as does the whole financial system, when it doesn't need to be that complicated. I've said it in a previous video. A strong umbrella insurance is far more effective for protecting your personal assets. Because people say, well, you know, if it's in your name, you're exposed. Well, I've got a question then. Let's say you have everything in a Revocable Trust and someone files a lawsuit against you. Who pays for the legal fees? Who pays for the lawyer? You need to pay for it. But if you have umbrella insurance, you're backed by a tier 1 institution who has a duty to defend you. It's not like car insurance where the insurer just tries to not defend you. This isn't the same type of insurance game. This is where they are dealing with high net worth individuals. They are got a reputation to defend. And yes, of course they don't want to pay out $10 million to deal with your lawsuit. And that's exactly why they're your best ally, because they're going to give you the full force of their legal system and their legal defense. And that's why I think umbrella insurance is far cheaper, 10 times cheaper possibly. And it is so much more straightforward. We could sit all day and put in duress clauses and flight clauses and bridge trust and offshore trusts. And honestly, the way I look at it from my research, it just defeats the whole purpose. Not to mention, the borrow side of it's already neutralised because you need to submit collateral to your own trust that you set up. And if you already have the collateral but you've put it into the trust, how does that work? And it needs to be viewed as a fully legitimate loan. And if it's going to be so legit, you might as well just borrow the money from any other lender. And if you're just trying to use it as like a personal piggy bank, you're going to spend all this money maintaining it for like 30 grand a year, all to defeat the purpose. Whereas a Wyoming LLC can achieve the same result for a physical asset. Physical assets are under the LLC, personal assets under your own name, digital assets under your own name, with a strong insurance provider. You can also have a serious Wyoming LLC. This is different to the standard Wyoming LLC. People might get this mixed up. The way I look at it is, one is a hotel where it has multiple rooms. Think about it, you can put an asset into each room. And you do the one LLC return every year, but you have multiple assets in it. But you do not get privacy. You get the protection, but you don't get the privacy. If you want the privacy, you just do the standard Wyoming LLC. You know, the Cook Islands Trust as well, offshore, massive IRS scrutiny. Yes, the IRS cannot pierce it and touch it, but they can just bleed you from the USA. They can just put on massive compliance. If you don't fill in the paperwork every single year, they will charge you aggressively, and it just creates a headache. It's nuclear protection, but it's overkill. If your net worth's over 25 million, then I would say, okay, yeah, you could have multiple of these, but they are for the reason they're designed for, and it's just for your children. You have them for your children, and it's not your personal asset. It doesn't get a step up in basis. So yeah, if you're uninsurable, yeah, so the insurance company only covers you for like $10 million, and you're worth 20 million, then of course you need to start dividing things up into trusts. But again, you're surrendering those assets. And in my opinion, I don't believe that there's any clean way to get money from an irrevocable trust. From all my research, looking at past lawsuits, you end up paying all these fees to get the trust gets pierced anyway, because if they see even a transaction going to your name, anything that it can be used against you that proves you are using the trust for your own personal gain, all that money's wasted. All that legal fees is wasted, and the management fees are wasted. So the behaviour overrules the structure. That's what I've discovered. The behaviour is what matters. The structure can be perfect, but if the person who's using it incorrectly, doesn't matter, destroys the whole trust. The whole trust is pierced, and it doesn't work. Yeah, the most dangerous creditor on earth is a US family court judge. So when it comes to divorce, this was very interesting. I was looking at it. What some people do is a floating spouse clause. So rather than the spouse's name being a trustee, so like saying, for example, like Jane Doe is the spouse and she's a trustee, a beneficiary, they would have it as whoever is the current spouse. So it's not actually naming them as an individual, because if they divorce or they split up, then that spouse is no longer a beneficiary, and that's how people protect themselves from divorce. But at the same time, a US judge can just pierce anything when it comes to divorce. They can just say, they can get through anything, really. That's why you can't beat a US family court judge. The only way I saw was the assets were never in the courtroom to begin with. They were set up so far in advance that they weren't even in question. That's interesting. Another thing as well is the system rewards proactive people, and it punishes brutally people that are reactive. Someone who waits until it's too late to set up a trust, it comes under fraudulent conveyance. So if you try and just open up a trust and throw your assets in it, and I don't have any proof of this, but I can imagine the lawyer just doing it anyway, even though they know it's under fraudulent conveyance, but because they're still getting paid, so they set it up, and it's just this trust is immediately pierced. So you can't just react to set them up. They need to be set up so far in advance. So it's honestly, there's just so many points of friction. So many points of friction. It's the main point is it defeats the buy, borrow, die framework. So what you're trying to achieve is getting defeated. Borrowing is more difficult. The dies part is difficult because if it's an irrevocable grantor trust, it doesn't get the step up in basis, which it would in your personal name. You know, borrowing's difficult, complexity, fees. You know, I don't have anything against these trusts, obviously. They're for certain people, uninsurable people, and your net worth is too high. Generational wealth transfer, that is really what it's for. Use it for what it's for, your grandchildren, your children, and it works perfectly. It becomes impenetrable because you've used it for its intended purpose. It becomes a great tool. But trying to use it to play the system, I just can't see how that works. I just can't see it. How do you get the money out of it? You just can't. I just can't see how. So umbrella insurance for me, far more easy. You get actual legal defence. You're getting a tier 1 institution. Far more effective. You know, it's like, why do we need to do this overkill strategy? And I see it all the time online in social media. People talk about, to do the Bible, you need to have a trust. Well, from my research, the only way I see it is just a revocable living trust, but that's not for the protection. That's just for transition. So there you go. Umbrella insurance resolves most of the asset protection on your own name. I mean, if you're extremely paranoid and you just don't trust the insurance company whatsoever, then fine. But the way I look at it is you're just surrendering. If you want the full asset protection, you're surrendering the assets entirely. So if someone has a genius way smarter than what I've discovered, I'd love to hear it. But from my research, it's overkill and there's no need for it.